Nigeria, anger is mounting over a delay in the cleanup of an oil spill in 2008 and 2009, putting the lives of 40,000 people at risk under a leaden sky in oil-rich southern Nigeria. Young men hung around with nothing to do, covering their noses from the noxious fumes of the polluted swamp. 1 year after the launch of a much-heralded cleanup program, the oil slicks which blackened the waters killed the fish and ruined the mangroves that were left behind and untouched.
The Niger Delta, the boats are docked and the fishermen absent, signs of an area desecrated by the region's oil industry. Ogoniland in southern Nigeria is suffering the consequences of 50 years of oil exploitation. The water is not fit to drink, and the few fishermen still working must travel miles just to find aquatic life.
We can't see no fish in this water because the water is stained with crude oil, and no living fish can be available to survive with this water. So the oil is polluted everything.
1 year ago, the Nigerian government launched a massive project to clean up Ogoni, spurred by the UN. The cleanup operation, costing an estimated $1 billion, was due to last some 30 years, with oil company Shell covering part of the costs. But 1 year on, only $10 million have been released and work has yet to begin.
We are trying to navigate very carefully to ensure that everything that will be put in place is something that will be durable and is something that could meet the test line that is expected of this cleanup by the United Nations.
Frustrated with the slow progress, local environmentalist Michael decided to plant trees to restore the damaged flora in the area in an attempt to counter the pollution.
Because of the pollution, a lot of carbon-related particles are thrown into the community and into the atmosphere. So the trees now trap and capture them, bring them down and use them for photosynthesis. Now when they use the carbon for photosynthesis, the trees will return oxygen for human consumption and we will live.
The largest hydrocarbon reserve in Africa, the Delta has long attracted multinational and multi-billion-dollar oil companies. But with little progress on the cleanup, they've left a legacy of anger and frustration.
The ballooning number of young people in East Africa, now accounting for about half of the total population, is worrying policymakers in the region due to scarcity of jobs. Now, the number continues growing, while it is estimated that 75% of East Africa's total population will be under the age of 34 by 2030. Unemployment among the youth has reached epic proportions in the continent. While acknowledging the challenge, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, speaking at a session on reinforcing the partnership between G7 and Africa, said that the international community has a role in helping the continent adapt as it heads for a new wave of industrialization. The UN says high levels of youth unemployment are not only a tragedy for young people themselves, but can also undermine development and generate frustration and alienation that in turn can become a threat to global peace and security. And with me this morning to discuss the global challenge of youth unemployment is Laila Jana, who's the founder and CEO of Summersource, which is a global non-profit social enterprise that has enabled over 35,000 people globally to lift themselves out of poverty by sourcing data projects from some of the world's largest companies, including Google, Glassdoor, and Microsoft since 2008. Laila, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here.
So talk to us about Summersource. What is this about?
So Sama means equal in Sanskrit, and our mission is to provide employment opportunities for low-income youth and women through the digital economy. We source large data projects, generally messy, unstructured data projects from big technology enterprises, including Google and Microsoft, and we train low-income people to do that work. And most of our workers are coming from very poor backgrounds. They're coming from informal settlements like Mathare and Kibera, and we're training them to work for these large companies.
So what inspired this, starting off with this project?
I worked at the World Bank and I worked for several NGOs, and I was really frustrated with the traditional aid model. What people need most is work and income, and if they have income, they can build their own wells and their own schools. And I think the aid mentality has really crippled millions of people around the continent, and I look forward to a new era of giving work instead of giving aid.
Yeah. So where did you start this, and when did you come to Kenya?
I started this in 2008, and it was really inspired by a trip I took to Kenya where I met local entrepreneurs who were involved in the digital economy. And their biggest challenge was finding contracts abroad. So they had the infrastructure, they had the talent. There is so much incredible talent here in Kenya, young people graduating from secondary schools, and very few employment opportunities. So I thought if I could connect the dots and connect these entrepreneurs with the infrastructure and the talent to global opportunities, then we could address the unemployment crisis head on.
Yeah. And how are you mitigating the even illiteracy levels that you have? Because you're talking about poor backgrounds, you're talking about those that are worst affected by unemployment. So how is it you mitigate and help out with that as well?
So we recruit from people who've completed secondary school, and we find that there are still a large number of people who've graduated from high school and still don't have any economic opportunities. So they go back to the slum, they end up in the informal economy, and that's the target population that we draw from. We have a program called Sama Source Digital Basics, which is a free training program for youth from these backgrounds. They can find out about it at samasourcedigitalbasics.org. And then they get basic training from local community organizations in those settlements, and we recruit from there.
All right. And you now have about 900 plus youth from Kenya that are working on various projects. So what type of projects is it they're involved in?
So we're working on some of the most cutting edge projects in the high-tech sector, including in artificial intelligence. One of the biggest needs in this new field of AI is to create training data for machine learning algorithms. So we do a lot of complex image tagging that feeds, for example, the algorithms that power self-driving cars. And one of the most motivating things, I think, for the young people in our center is knowing that they are working at the forefront of technology in Silicon Valley.
And I was speaking to the Cabinet Secretary here in Kenya, ICT, the other day, and they're talking about setting up a JIRA digital program, which again, they hope to get employment for young people on that base. So would you consider that kind of working together with other stakeholders like government?
Absolutely. We're happy to partner with government wherever possible. What we've seen is that the biggest challenge is demand. The biggest challenge is really getting demand for that work because there is so much supply in places like Kenya, so many talented young people graduating from school and able to do this work. So we've been really focused on the demand side of the equation where we feel that we could add the most value.
Yeah. Somebody watching this morning who want to get involved, how do they do that?
So number one, if they're young people interested in doing this work, they can check out samasourcedigitalbasics.org. If they're a company that might have work to give, they can check out our website at samasource.org or follow us on Twitter. And I have a book coming out in September that lays the case for this new model of impact sourcing, which is really thinking about how big corporations using their supply chain can directly impact poverty by sourcing from low-income groups.
Yeah. Isn't that a conversation that also needs to happen at a government and continental level, perhaps, because largely we see in Africa, as you talked about, getting mind shift and paradigm shift from asking for aid all the time. So how is it at a larger scale you hope that we can have a shift, not only here in Kenya, but around the continent?
Absolutely. Well, one of the biggest clients for all kinds of work around the continent is governments, right? Governments have huge procurement departments and they are allocating massive budgets. And so if we can incentivize governments, or maybe through the aid agencies that are providing these funds, incentivize governments to directly hire low-income people so that the poorest people can get the benefit from these these large contracts, that's where we'll see a real shift in terms of poverty.
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge now is that many of the people who benefit from these large contracts are not the worst off people in the population, not the people who need the work most.
Yeah, and you're parting short this morning because young people, very huge number still that remains unemployed. Are you just based here in Nairobi or around the country?
We are in Nairobi, in Kenya, and in Uganda we have a presence in northern Uganda in the region of Gulu, where we employ many people from rural backgrounds who were previously working in agriculture.
All right. Thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
with
It's a
us.
pleasure to be
Laila,
here.
has been a pleasure to have you with us here in studio. You can check out that website. It is
samasource.org and samasourcedigitalbasics.org for the training here in Kenya.
all right.